Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Jesse and Nina and Amanda, also Neil and Mike, for your facilitation of our session. Our chapter 10 in the text is hashtag Faculty Matter, faculty support and interventions integrated into global learning. And we are happy to be presenting our co-authors, Joan Gillespie, Dana Gross, and Lisa Jaskinski. Sarah, do you want to go ahead and talk with the group about our research questions
Sure.
and the impetus for our study?
Yeah, so the impetus for the study really was about faculty-led off-campus programs and how they present high strategic value, but entail opportunity costs as well. And we really felt that it was essential to examine and understand the impact of leading not just study abroad, but domestic experiences as well on faculty members' teaching, research service, and ultimately our overall well-being. So we came up in the summer of 2015 with some major research questions. One, what factors contribute to the study abroad, study away, faculty leaders transformation? We'll just call that SASA as we referred to it the whole time. Two, how do these factors inform their ability to impact their students and institutions? Three, how do faculty members describe the contexts or situations that have influenced their experiences leading global programs? And finally, what is the greater institutional impact of faculty-led SASA programs? So those were the big questions that we endeavored to examine through our research. Prudence.
So, if we look at our project goals, Jesse, we wanted to make sure that we highlight the perceptions of the value of campus programs for faculty and institutions. We also wanted to suggest some policies and practices that would enhance the transformative impact for faculty, students, and institutions. So we could go to the next slide. Faculty matter. I want us to think about this for a while. Faculty need permission to speak about their transformation themselves and their learning independent of their students. So we actually, our cohort really had to fight for our focus on faculty in the seminar. And Mick and I were talking the other day about when in 2015 they kept saying, but how does this relate to students? How does this relate to students? So we came up collectively with this idea that, like all good parents, you do have to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. And as you'll see as we go through some of the slides, um, it was really important that we talked about the faculty learning and transformation in the global education process. And we were happy that by the end of the seminar in 2017, we got unanimous buy-in for our focus. So if we go to the next slide that talks about desired forms of support, I'll just say a little bit about our methodology. So we targeted 31 institutions. They were the members of the Associated Colleges of the Midwest, the Associated Colleges of the South, and Elon University. Of the 31 institutions, 28 responded to our first survey. We designed, there were 59 questions, and we had over 800 participants that we targeted. We had a response of 123 faculty leaders, which yielded us about 27 We were a little sad that Morehouse and Spelman, the two member colleges for those regions, did not respond in the numbers that we would have wanted, and that could have yielded us some, I think, demographic information with regards to race and ethnicity. But nonetheless, we thought that was pretty good. Of the 223 respondents, we asked whether they would be willing to be contacted or participate in a second survey, a follow-up. 150 of those participants responded to the second survey, which was much shorter, 8 questions. And of those questions, 5 were open-ended because we wanted to do some qualitative analysis about their experiences. And the faculty members had to have led at least one SASA program in the past 5 years, and they also had to be affiliated with either the ACM, the ACS, or Elon University. So these are the desired forms of support that we gathered as themes from the responses that we got. Greater financial support from the institution, not just for faculty, but also for students as well. More human resources, so people dedicated to the enterprise at the institution, perhaps accompanying the faculty leader or leaders, and so on. Logistical training and workshops. People talked about not feeling confident to deal with mental health, FERPA, and other issues. They wanted recognition for their work, that it was seen as very much a part of the institutional mission and something that they valued. And it also meant that people wanted the work of global education to be structurally embedded in the university or their organization's processes. So promotion and tenure, for example. They wanted emotional support. So not just for students, but when they were experiencing trauma or personal issues themselves. And then there were some other rewards that were highlighted in the study. So on our next slide, Sarah, do you want to maybe jump in there?
So what we did find is that participants who reported high levels of institutional support for global learning were more likely to experience positive post-SASA feelings, and that has everything to do with the systems of support, the desired support mechanisms that Prudence cited in the previous slide. So if we go to the next slide, you can see what those implications were and some of those positive outcomes for those who received multiple types of support. They were more eager to lead a different or the same SASA program. They found leading SASA a worthwhile use of time and energy, felt more connected to the mission of their institution, felt like they really had improved relationships with colleagues and students, and ultimately really felt renewed and energized, which is sometimes counterintuitive to returning from a SASA experience. So those were some of the really positive effects. There were also, some negative effects too for those that didn't feel like they got as much of the support. But in the end, we learned that negative transformation, looking through the lens of transformative learning, is transformation nonetheless. Did you want to talk about faculty transformation, Prudence?
Yes, and you can jump in also and help me talk about Mesero and our use of his theoretical framework of transformative learning theory. But what faculty talked about here was that the experience or experiences lead to greater self-examination. It also helped them to critically assess, I think, some of their internal assumptions. And if these themes are sounding familiar as they relate to students, it's because they are. So, just a spoiler alert, what students go through, chances are faculty are also experiencing, I think, which reinforces why we valued really focusing on faculty learning and transformation in our study. They also had feelings sometimes of disconnect from traditional social expectations. We found that with our students returning from the study abroad enterprise, and we also find that happens with faculty as well. And they also talked about kind of relating one's discontent um, to similar experiences, I guess, of others. So where they believe that their problems are shared. So what this means is that there's kind of less focus on particularizing or othering um, people who were part of a different cultural orientation, but they perhaps were able to situate themselves more globally. And then they also found that it built confidence and self confidence and competence as well, because they were navigating multiple roles, not just teaching, but sometimes logistics, managing student issues, and so on. So it's nothing like trial by fire. And then also they were ready to try new roles and assess them and reintegrate them into society. And also, I would add here, into their teaching when they return to campus. So before I cover some of the institutional implications, Sarah, perhaps you can talk a little bit about Mesereau.
Sure. When we were trying to find a theoretical framework for our study, we really all came to the conclusion that Mesereau's theory on transformative learning, while pretty much across the board applied to student learners, albeit college students as well, adult student learners, we just thought that that would be a really excellent framework for faculty in this study, and that faculty are learners as well. And that is the key takeaway, really, that our paradigms are shifting at the same time that students' paradigms are shifting as well. And if faculty have negative transformation, then that's absolutely going to rub off on the students. But as Prudence said, just some of those transformations, like feeling of disconnect from traditional social expectations, or all the way to trying new roles and assessing them, reintegrating into society with the other perspective. These are all opportunities for transformation that SASA programs can provide, developing new perspectives and new behaviors and analyzing those changes through that lens of transformative learning theory. Just really allowed us to have a unique understanding of how learners and faculty as learners make meaning and adjust our prior views as well, which is really important. So important global learning outcomes are perspective oriented, not just for students, but really crucially for faculty as well, in our efforts to guide and mentor and teach those students. So we felt like it was a really great fit.
Yeah. And so when we looked at implications for institutions that as I've mentioned, and faculty often call for more kind of pre-program training and preparation, one of the troubling things that we found in our results was that about 23% of the respondents said that they were offered no preparation at all. And so I want us to think about that too. The prospect of an institution or an organization sending students with faculty leaders who are not well prepared for, and we're not just talking about pedagogy and teaching, but think about our COVID world and think about everything that we are experiencing now and the value that comes with putting the work in on the front end of maybe making sure that in terms of risk management, logistics, pedagogy, we're really sending faculty leaders who are well prepared. We can't, of course, I think, plan for everything, but to have zero preparation, I think was quite troubling. We also, in terms of our findings, they talked about some of the additional forms of support for faculty who lead programs and training that lasted more than 30 days, and ways that our institutions needed to pay greater attention to faculty as well on the reentry process. And our leaders, you know, talked about perhaps not just the implication for their personal and their professional lives, but maybe thinking about mentoring programs and so on. So partnering a first time leader with somebody who has more experience, for example. So there are some other, I think, currents that will come up, but accompanying our chapter and the resources that are available on the book's website, you can click on any of the chapters and find some discussion questions. And so we wanted to kind of, before we transition to our audience for Q&A, think about these four questions within the context of our world as it stands today. So, like any labor of love, when one birth to it, the world has moved on. So, what has changed, if anything, since we devised this chapter, since the book's writing and publication earlier than this year? And of course, the answer is everything, right? So, on our minds, are the ways in which our campuses articulate the relationship between support for faculty, global learning, and what the evidence of that learning might be. And when we think about it in relation to students as well. So perhaps some of our attendees may have um, some thoughts about this question. Is there a clear articulation in your organizations of attention to our own learning, especially in terms of the way that we support our students' global learning? And then what is the evidence of this? So I would say that for Elon, the very fact that we had a session or a 2-year period where we could engage multiple institutions and colleagues from around the country and the world on the issue of global education and engagement is clear evidence of a commitment for that support. And that's at a macro level. At a micro level, I think, like everybody else, there are things that we can and we are striving to do a whole lot better. So I think we'd be really curious about what some of that evidence looks like in other places in terms of a focus on faculty learning. And then, secondly, how might institutions include faculty perspectives in both the planning and operationalization of new programs, policies, and so on. So for us, again, and we have a curricular process that is owned and managed by faculty in partnership with our Global Education Center. For example, we have a assistant dean who works with faculty who have conceived an idea. But I wondered with this question whether there were kind of broader ways and strategies that institutions might use for faculty for buy-in. So often, for example, faculty will see study abroad as an appendage to their work for promotion, tenure, and other rewards. And are there ways that we can better integrate it so that we get more faculty buy-in? One of the things we also found is that for our leaders who had families and were loath to lead them, are there ways that we can work to better integrate support for faculty with families or dependent others in that process? So these are all questions that we think about and ask for our students, but that we also think are quite pertinent for our faculty leaders as well. Sarah, do you want to tackle the last two questions?
Sure. If you go to the next slide, we have some questions that we're grappling with right now regarding the COVID gap that are really, most immediate in the absence of optimum institutional investments in professional development. What strategies and steps might faculty leaders of SASA take to advance their own professional development? And also, what new frontiers for faculty development and study abroad, study away should institutions consider in a changing higher education landscape? And these are difficult questions to consider right now for a variety of reasons, but we're all dealing with these questions just in general on our own campuses and globally, and the situation changes minute by minute, really. And so what we say today might change tomorrow, but nevertheless, these are important questions. We're learning more and more and adapting more and more to best disseminating content on campus to our students, but how are we going to deal with study abroad and study away during a global pandemic where, we thought we were living in this borderless world, and now, the US might be banned from Europe and all kinds of things are happening. So,
And I don't think we can underestimate, we don't really have the data yet, the way in which the pandemic has really, I don't know that it's the, but a lot of our colleagues, faculty, staff colleagues have been laid off or lost their jobs as a result of the enterprise. Some schools and colleges are just cutting study abroad. So we really need to be thinking about the measures that we can take individually and collectively to make sure that the gains that we made, and for me in particular among students of color, aren't completely eradicated, right? So we're seeing in the field a lot of virtual internships, virtual study abroad, people really trying to use the online environment to give students some kind of immersive experience. And so, Jesse, we probably have violated your time restraints for talking, but thank you. And we would welcome some conversations and questions about anything that we've said.